Hey, stepmom, how often do you feel like you have no control over your life? Like everything is dictated either by your spouse's ex or by the stepkids and their schedules. Today, we're going to talk about how to get your control back and whether that's actually a good idea. I'm Cameron. I spent years building my career and creating a life I loved. And when my Prince Charming finally showed up, he had 4 kids in tow. Fast forward through lots of mistakes made and lessons learned, step family life was much more complicated than I realized. If you're looking for help with blended family life, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Stepmom Diaries, where we keep it real as we dish about all the things. This is your weekly dose of blended family inspiration and encouragement. You're not the wicked stepmother, so let me help you find your fairy tale ending. Come on, let's do this. One of the things I hear most often from stepmoms is that they feel like they have no control over their lives. Their schedules are dictated by an ex that they have no relation to, and kids that they didn't birth. Where they live is out of their control, and they don't have a full say in parenting decisions. And if I'm being honest, I've felt that way too. Even recently, we were trying to plan out our summer, but we could not get my husband's ex to work with us on custody for the summer. And we're going back and forth and back and forth, and I could feel myself getting more and more frustrated as I had friends trying to make plans with me and I couldn't commit to anything. And I got to a certain point where I had to just take a step back and say, you know what? All right, I'm going to relax about this because I cannot do anything about it. This is completely out of my control. And when I decided to kind of let go of it, I almost immediately felt better. I felt a little bit more at peace. And honestly, my shoulders felt a little more relaxed and I just felt a little bit less stressed. And let's be honest, if you're in a high conflict situation, which I know a lot of you are, actions taken by your spouse's ex can blow up your afternoon. They can blow up your entire day, an evening, or, even a vacation. It is easy to feel like you are just along for the ride and somehow have lost all say in what happens in your own life. And this is something I think a lot of stepmoms don't necessarily think about when they take on the role of step-parent. The fact that, you are going to lose a lot of your independence and a lot of control over your schedule and other things that happen to you because, frankly, you're entering a family where there are lots of dynamics and other things that are completely out of your control. I think this is an emotion that probably every single stepmom has felt at one point or another. And let's face it, when you feel like you don't have control over your life, it really contributes to how you take care of yourself, or actually don't, right? When I think back to the times that I feel the crappiest, and I'm not talking about just stepmom times, I'm talking about just life, it's usually when I am eating badly, when I'm not exercising, when I'm not sleeping well, and when I'm just generally not taking care of myself. And when I look back on it and think about what it is that has caused me to not take care of myself for however long, that period is, it's usually when I feel overwhelmed, like I can't control anything. And whether that's at work or at home or in a blended family, that feeling can really impact your entire life. And so as a stepmom, hello, feeling out of control can be your entire existence. So how do you get that feeling under control, so to speak? How do you reclaim your life? How do you take charge? Or is it worth looking at whether you actually need that control to reclaim your life? Are there other ways that you can find peace? Let's walk through 5 things that will help you work through those feelings and help you get some peace with these out of control thoughts and feelings. Now, notice I did not say help you gain control over them, right? More on that a little later, okay? So let's start with the first step, the first thing you should do. And that is to identify what it is that's making you feel out of control. And that sounds easy. Maybe it is, but it may take a little bit of thinking. Think about what might make you feel like you have more of a say in your life. What is it that's bothering you? Is it the scheduling and lack of control there? Is it that you're feeling like an outsider? Is it the lack of say you have in parenting? These kids that live with you, maybe it's 100% of the time, maybe it's 50% of the time, maybe it's a couple weekends a month, whatever it is it that lack of say? I know for me, it really has come down to the scheduling and the decision making. There's so much as a stepmom that I don't get a say in, like when we have the kids and the custody arrangement. That very much affects my life, but I don't get to decide it. I get input, of course. And thank God, Craig views me as a total partner and he goes to bat for my interests. And, he and I decide together what our position is. And then he, negotiates that with his ex-spouse. But it's not me that negotiates that, right? I'm sort of on the sidelines when that's all happening. And that for me has been, what has been a driver for me feeling out of control over the years. So once you've identified what it is that's making you feel out of control, the second thing I want you to do is take a hard look at what might be actually underneath that. What is driving you to want that control in that area, right? Is it because you want to feel like you belong in the family? Outsider syndrome is real, y'all. I talked about this in episode 15, and if you haven't listened to that episode, I definitely think you should. But let me tell you, control isn't necessarily going to help you feel like you belong in your family. There are lots of other ways to deal with that, a number of which I talked about back in episode 15. Or if it's not the outsider syndrome and feeling like you belong, is it maybe that you want to restore your life to a little bit of what it looked like before you entered this blended family? That's totally normal. And I know for me, I didn't meet Craig and settle down until I was 40. So I had a lot of years of independence, a lot of years of kind of doing my own thing and of having complete control over what I did and when. If I didn't want to go somewhere, I didn't go. And if I wanted to, I did. That all changed when I became a stepmom. Because all of a sudden, I had custody calendars and sports on the weekends, birthday parties, sleepovers, and almost none of those things were anything that I could control. All those things that were suddenly on my calendar, I could not just bail if I wanted to have a night in and be by myself, right? And if I wanted to plan a vacation with Craig, it had to be worked around the custody schedule or whether we could get his ex to switch weeks with us. That was a huge transition for me. And I think it is for a lot of stepmoms, because the honest truth is that's not something that we necessarily think about when we get into a step family. I talked back in episode 3 about expectations when you're entering a blended family and the need to grieve the expectations that you brought into step family life that haven't exactly played out how you thought it would. And the control is absolutely something that, you need to consider when you're thinking about your expectations. I can tell you that dealing with control over my own schedule was not something I thought about at all when I decided to settle down with Craig. It was a huge transition. And I think I'm not alone there. I think that that's a transition for a lot of women. So take a minute and figure out, go a little deeper, right? When you've identified what it is making you feel out of control, go deeper and think about what is actually driving you to want control over that thing that's bothering you. Hey, stepmom. Do you want a totally free 30-minute coaching session with yours truly? Well, you're in luck because I am giving one away. If you would like to win a totally free 30-minute coaching session with me, just head over to iTunes Podcasts, leave a review for the Stepmom Diaries, preferably by saying something lovely, of course. Screenshot your review and send it to me at hello@thiscustomlife.com, or you can post it and tag me on social media. I'll enter you into a drawing, and one lucky winner stepmom is going to get a totally free 30-minute coaching session with me. So what are you waiting for? Head on over to iTunes and leave your review now. So the third step I want you to take, once you've figured out what it is that's driving you, is think about whether control is actually possible. Are there ways to reclaim control over any of those areas that are bothering you, right? There may be. There may be. And if there are, that is great. But I think even if you can, the truth is that any control you regain is not going to look like the control you had over your life prior to settling down with your partner. So I want you to be prepared that as you think this through, you may not actually be able to get that control back, at least not right now. For example, if scheduling is what bothers you, which I've talked about, that is something I had to adjust to, there may be some things that you just can't dictate. There may be custody schedules and calendars that are set out in your spouse's divorce decree that you cannot do anything about. However, what you can do is talk to your spouse about how you're feeling and try to find some things that you can control. Try to find some times that you can control. Or, try to work towards some kind of special arrangement. If there's something that you want to do that's outside the normal schedule or calendar, try to figure out, is there a way that you can do that and take that control back, so that you can get that done? Or, maybe work with your spouse and set aside some time that is non-negotiable you time that you schedule and everybody else works around. Okay? Now listen to me here. I am not talking about inconveniencing people on purpose. I am not talking about trying to force your you time into some kind of custody arrangement or any of that stuff, right? For me, what this usually looks like is a dinner out with a few of my best girlfriends. I put it on the calendar for the time that works for me. I don't worry about whether we have the kids or not. I put it on when it works for me. And if it means that I miss bedtime, if it means I'm not home for dinner with the kids, we work around it. And that's something that, my husband and I have talked about, and it's really important to me, and it's important that I'm able to have the flexibility to schedule that. So that's what we do. So try and maybe find some time for you that you can schedule regardless of what custody looks like or, whatever, sports schedules or whatever. The rest of the family will understand. I mean, it's a big adjustment to enter this life, and, you've got to make that adjustment on your time, right? So whatever it is that is making you feel out of control, whatever those underlying feelings are, try and see if there's a way that, you can, even if it's just a little bit of control. You're not going to change the schedule. You're not going to change the calendar. There are things that are non-negotiable, but you can set aside some time for yourself and maybe figure out what control might look like. And it may look a little different than you thought it would when you came into all this, right? So let's talk about the fourth thing. I want you to think about alternative ways that may better address what your underlying feelings are. Your feelings around the areas where you're feeling a lack of control, right? So this can look like a lot of different things, and it can look like setting boundaries, right? Boundaries are a great way to help you put the right parameters in place so that you can function in a more healthy way. Looking at the scheduling example again, like if that stuff picks at sort of the underlying resentment that you've got towards your partner's ex, then set some boundaries around your interactions there, or set some processes in place that will help you be more involved, but maybe give you less interaction with the ex, whatever is more healthy for you there, right? Like think about what that looks like. Think about alternative ways. Be flexible, right? Communicate with your spouse about all this. Communication, I always say this, it is the key to everything. And I know some of these conversations can be awkward and, sometimes scary and a little hard. But, have you been honest with your partner about how you're feeling about, these issues around control that you're having, that you feel like things are maybe spinning out of control? Like I said, they're not easy discussions to have, but you need to have them. You need to ask for help from your spouse. That's what they're there for. Let your spouse help you, vent to them and maybe, work on this. Look for some alternative ways to address your underlying feelings. Look for those ways together, And the other thing I would say in terms of, alternative ways, a lot of this can come back to that outsider syndrome. Go back and listen to episode 15. I've got some great tips there for dealing with outsider syndrome. It is real, y'all. And I don't care how great your stepmom situation is. I don't care how amazing and how accepting your stepfamily is. I think every stepmom ever at one point or another has felt like they're in this family that isn't theirs, or like they don't belong. Like this, new family has all of this stuff, all of these experiences they've had before you got there. So go back and listen to episode 15. I think you might find some good tips there for dealing with it. So these are just a few ways that you can think about, how to better address your underlying feelings about these areas where you don't have control. And the last thing that I want you to think about after you think about, maybe some alternative ways to deal with control is I want you to accept that there will be certain things that you will not be able to control. I know that sounds like sort of a no-brainer, like, yeah, you're not going to have control over everything in your life, but I want you to really think about it and verbalize to yourself that you understand that you're not going to be able to control everything. I want you to pledge to yourself to not let these outside factors exert an outsized control, again, that word control, over your life and emotions, right? Because if you're bothered by the lack of control you have over your life, you're sort of giving those factors control over you instead, right? At the end of the day, the only thing you can control is you. You cannot control all these other factors. You can't control what other people say to you or do or any of that stuff. You can only control you. And honestly, if you've been listening to my podcast for a while, you know that that's kind of my mantra. My stepmom mantra is that you can't control anything anyone else says or does. You may not be able to control the schedule. You may not be able to control the ways that your stepkids are parented that you may not agree with. You can control you. And on that note, I want to just quickly say, we've talked a lot about the word control, and it's not a bad word. I know usually when you think about controlling things, it sounds sort of stringent and strict and, has some negative connotations, especially when you're talking about controlling other people and things like that. But, that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is control over your own life. And that is totally different. That is a self-care thing. That is something that helps you function. If you feel like you don't have control over your life, if you feel like things are spinning, out of control and, you have no hand in affecting things that impact you on a daily basis, that can impact your overall health. That can impact the way you view the world. And, it can be a really negative experience that can take down, your whole family. I don't think it's so dire in every case, right? But it has a serious impact. So I really encourage you to take these 5 steps and, really evaluate what it is you're trying to control about your life, what it is that's frustrating you, why you feel like you need that control, what's the underlying, what does that underlying reason look like? And then think about, are there other ways that you can address those feelings? Are you actually going to get control over that part of your life? Or are there certain things that you're just not going to be able to control? And is that maybe okay? Is it okay to give up some control and, come to a place of acceptance and have peace with that and move on, right? So control is not a bad word, and you can only control you. If those are the two things that you take away from today's episode, I hope that it helps you really examine, your stepmom life and figure out some ways that you can, look inward, but also have some conversations with your partner and really improve some of these areas where things are feeling a little out of control. It is possible, and I'm here to help you. So that's all I've got for this week. Head on over to thiscustomlife.com/episode 18 for all the show notes. And I'll have links there to everything that we've talked about in today's episode. And I will see you back here next week. That's it for this week. If you've enjoyed our chat, I hope you'll help spread the word. Share this episode with friends and head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts and leave me a review. And don't forget, for more great stepmom content, head on over to thiscustomlife.com and follow me on social media. Just search This Custom Life on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. Until next time, you keep being you and know that we are in this together. See you here next week.